Okay, good morning, Professor Tootle. I didn't look it up. I think it's our 119th show. Does that sound
Wow.
about right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It sounds great to me. 119.
And
That's
it's
amazing.
just getting old. We've covered every topic under the sun. We've had a variety of experts, mostly you, but a variety of experts. This is going to be an interesting show. We've never had quite one like this, have we?
I not that I can recall.
Yeah, and so how much prep work did we do for this?
I did zero. That's
Right,
in the contract when we
right.
first signed on 120 shows ago. That was my one demand. I will do no preparation.
You do no prep work, and our paychecks, our wallets are full because of that.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
here's my prep work. I took a good
Oh,
three
look, I've
months.
got one of those too, a blank sheet
Okay,
of
yeah,
paper.
but I wrote 12 things on the side of mine. Can
Oh,
you
you've
see?
got 12 things? I'm showing you that my piece of paper is blank.
So I'm just trying to make sure our guest is comfortable that we just are two guys chatting, and with him we'll have three guys, and then we got some guys and gals joining us. So Mr. NJ,
Yes,
do you
sir.
go
Good
by
morning.
Nicholas, or do you go by like some like Esquire? How do you
No,
like to be
just,
referred to?
you know, uh, I come from a long line of Nicholas J's in my family. So somebody stuck me with initial N, initial J when I was a kid, and it stuck. So
Nice.
I'm
So
among
preferred
friends. So please call me
NJ
NJ.
is preferred, and I kind of like JB occasionally, but not as formal as you. Okay, so NJ, before we begin, I want you to just know Professor Tootle for a second. So, Professor, we haven't done this in maybe 50 shows. Um, can you give us your bona fides? I mean, just like the highlights, just
In terms of
like five
politics,
sentences of who you are.
my name's Stephen Tootle. I'm a professor of history at College of Sequoias, but I also teach at Ashland University, where I am in their graduate faculty. I still am affiliated with the Ashbrook Center. Sometimes work, I'm friends with the Teaching American History people and the Bill of Rights Institute people, and I met John at AEI. And I sometimes do work for what's called something called Constituting America. Politically, I volunteered for my first campaign when I was in junior high in 1988. That was the Bush campaign, and was a campaign volunteer for most of my youth, and then eventually, when I moved back home, I was on the Central Committee of the Republican Party and was the vice chair of the Republican Party for a good part of 10-ish years, and maybe more. It might have been 12 or 14. I don't remember exactly. But I was elected to multiple terms as on the Central Committee and in leadership there. And
Is this your county or your state? Of
our
your county?
congressmen at the time were Devin Nunes and Kevin McCarthy and David Valadao. Those are the congressmen that I worked most closely with.
And you have 2 degrees. No, you
Oh
have
yeah,
three.
I mean I'm a bachelor's, master's, and a PhD in history. Yeah,
Yeah, American history.
yeah,
Um,
American.
I have said before, and you didn't necessarily, oh, you've got a second supporter. This is a former cabinet member for Governor Owens. You might know Drew Bowen. So he's now on. Professor, I have said before, with a little bit of braggadocio, that you are the number one conservative history professor in America. Now I know
Oh,
that matters.
oh, that's not true. I mean, there's probably I don't know.
Uh,
There's probably 24 other people I could name off the top of my head who are.
330 million, you're one of the top 24 conservative U.S. history professors
Well,
in the
I'm
world.
sure that there's more, but I'm just saying I could probably name 24
Right.
who.
Well, I've acclaimed you as number one, so we'll just go with that. All right,
Yeah.
NJ, do you mind doing a similar, just a couple minutes for our group? Because I'm not sure how many of my friends or our friends know you. So why don't you
Yeah,
give us a
sure.
little of
No
your
problem at
profile?
all. I'll kind of follow Stephen's template just a little bit. Um, I think as far as the most relevant information goes, I've been in politics, Republican politics, ever since I was a young kid also. My first campaign was working for Ronald Reagan in 1980. I was
Woo!
15 years old and just volunteering. And it was just door to door leaflets, knocking on doors, knocking and walking. And and I finally got my first break in politics when I walked into the national headquarters for Bush Quail 88 here in Denver on mistake. And I thought it was Colorado Republicans And I walked
Hmm.
into that office one morning and I said, yeah, I'm looking for Colorado Republicans. And I was hoping to work on a campaign. And they're like, well, this is Bush Quail 88. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And they're like, well, what were you going to do for them? And that was the beginning of
Right.
what was the better part of 40 years in politics since. So I've had my own firm on K Street for the last 17 years. And we do primarily finding federal contracts for private companies that do what they do very well. And we also do a lot of campaign issue work, policy, polling, you name it, speech writing. We're a full service lobbying firm, and we were over at 1701 Pennsylvania for 3 years before that. So I'd say the majority of the last 40 years I've spent in politics, not intentionally, as you can tell. It was quite accidental, but it's been pretty good. So I can't complain. Went to University of Colorado, a degree in economics, and that's all there is to it. So I've just tried to stay active whenever I can, and I'd like to apologize in advance if I may. Being in this, and some of my colleagues here would know this on either side of the aisle, once you hang around in this business for long enough, you come across more like a clinician than you do an ideologue. And I started off as an ideologue, and um, I've been cured of those sentiments in the last 3 decades. So if I sound boring, I apologize.
Yeah, we'll try to spice it up if you sound boring. No problem. I do have one question before we begin. I understand loyalty in the army, heck, in neighborhoods, in fraternity. I mean, there's a lot of loyalty I've been involved in, and all political loyalty. I've truly been involved in politics for over 40 years as well. And so I get that you don't want to hire somebody that's like gonna, give your inside secrets or badmouth you or also campaign against you. I get all that. It
Sure.
does seem like President Trump has it on steroids. It seems like he's probably the best, the very best at this. And so I'm just curious how you're going to present yourself today. My opinion is if you're not 100% with the president, you're against him. And I've heard that from George, it was President George W. Bush before. You're with us or against us. Um,
Sure.
can you give just an insight on that before we begin? Are you just 100% with whatever he says is just grand,
You
or
know,
if how do you have any clients?
I'd say this, and again, I think my colleagues would agree with me on this. You can stay loyal to your own value system as a conservative. You can stay loyal to the principles that preceded President Trump and will go on long after President Trump. And most importantly, in my business, I have to say up front, I am one of only two Republicans in my own business, and the rest of them are hardcore, dyed in the wool liberals. But they are the smartest, they are the brightest, they are the most experienced, and I'm the dumbest person in my own company. So if you take that as the backdrop, you have to take into account, John, that the loyalty factor, I believe, is completely true for President Trump, but he's here for 4 years. So he's going to stack his deck to the best of his ability for the operatives that are going to execute his plan and his strategy. As for someone like me, I think I play the long game. I always have, always will, and that requires flexibility. If you told me that my business was only going to be around until the end of the year and that I better make hay, I might realign, my strategy with just pure, unadulterated aggressiveness. And so that would require a different mindset. So I think that I've met the president. The president has been cordial to me, very nice. We are not friends. I like his policies. As a conservative, I'm loyal to his policies because I like all of them. And that's what I voted for, and that's what the majority of America voted for, the swing states, the majority, the popular vote, the electoral college, and he's executing it, and there's some unpopularity on the other side. But I'm not here to speak to the breakdown of that. But what I am saying is I voted for him for a reason. So I'm loyal to his policies. He's not the guy that I would want to have a beer with or dinner with.
I'm not
Out.
sure you can say that. Stop that. You won't. Then you won't get. You gotta be. You gotta want to have a beer. He's the best beer drinker friend you've ever had.
God, I just can't relate to some people. And people
Uh,
like you and Trump, billionaires, I cannot relate to those people as well as I wish I could. So,
okay. All right, that's a good enough answer for now. Let's see what how the professor wants to take this. Professor, I've got 12 items. Should you start to fail or flounder, otherwise, I kind of want you to lead the show, but make sure. I mean, our specialty. The reason this is such a well-watched show is it's a history show. So you sure ask questions, but we got to intersperse history. And NJ, if the professor fails on that, you're an amateur historian. Feel free to add in some history if he fails to do so. Professor
sure.
Tudor, why don't you start us out?
Well, before we get started, is there anybody else on the panel today who we need to introduce, or are we?
Oh, I should just point out two, I think. And Don, I'm not pointing you out because you're the loyal opposition. I want to highlight people that are probably loyal to NJ's position. Nancy is a former chair of the Republican Party that joined specifically because she wants to provide you some moral or support, NJ, if you need it. You won't need it, but it's nice to have a couple friends that are loyal to your position. Drew
Always.
Bolin also. I think he's still in a government job, so I need to be careful with him. But Drew Bolin's a former cabinet or sub-cabinet member for Governor Owens, and he also is wants to make sure you do well today, NJ. I think that's politically correct.
Thank you.
And then there's some other variety. Oh, good, Scott Yenzer. Scott, I can't really say because he's in the private sector and trying to get clients and stuff. And although Colorado's not a particularly little state to the president, but he's a friendly face. Like, how's that without getting him in trouble? So you have three people that joined specifically to say rah rah, not just defender of President Trump, but an advocate of President Trump. How's that, NJ? How's that for making sure you don't feel alone?
I like that characterization because you can like a person's policies, but really stay neutral on the personality image that's sold to us every single day by the media.
Yeah. Well, and
So
I've got a
with
lot.
that, I do want to ask about just one thing that you mentioned in the course of your answer is that you said you liked all of the policies of President Trump, and I guess I just want to give you a chance to answer the question. What do you like about what do you like about him?
Well, I like that when he'll begin, and this goes back to his first term too. As a conservative fellow myself, I like the idea that regulations can be burdensome and have been burdensome, and that he rolled back tons of regulations in his first term, undid almost everything Biden did in Trump's second term. He has wants to make us energy dominant. He wants to lower taxes. I think smaller government is a theme with the president, and I am fond of anything. I might not like everything that comes with it. I might not I might not be in the best prime cut for the people that will get tax relief, but I like that the job creators will get some relief. So when it comes to smaller government, lower taxes, stronger defense, the deportation and immigration policies, I'm completely for. And so there's going to be a few nitpicky items that I think that I'm just going to toss to the side because those are in the margin of error for me if I think that the aggregate effort is going to be beneficial to the United States.
Okay, Professor, he just outlined 6 items that I concur with. I like those. That's why I was a Republican for 32 years. Historically, sounds like President Trump is a conservative president and aligned with everybody else you and I have supported for our lives and 100 years before, right?
Well, that's why I guess I would ask NJ about because I would look at that same list and say, I don't understand. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. So I'd like to understand what you're seeing with regard to some of these issues. Actually, deregulation I'll take off the table because I think that especially in the first term, he appointed some good people and a lot of good deregulation took place during his first term. I just
Okay.
but so I want to set his first term aside, first term deregulation aside, and I will concede.
Okay.
I'm
So,
just not so
Professor,
sure on second term deregulation.
I have to look at him in a way. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I play a long game when it comes to policy and politics. And so I can't help but consider his first term as sort of something that was interrupted in the middle, and now he's picking it up again. And so, like any of us that would take on a task based on a set of ideals and principles, you can't really just say, well, the first term doesn't matter because now we're looking at the second term. There is a continuation that I believe was interrupted by another president, so he's got to pick up the ball. Um, I know that you say that you just don't see that right now, but we also have to look at
well, wait,
something.
on regulations, let's keep on that. Where
I'm
do
sorry,
we?
and I'm talking about the wider list of things that I gave that right now we're
All right, let's
7%
keep on
into the
regulations for
term.
just a second, NJ. So,
Yep.
Professor, are there nuances of this term that you have concerns about the president's?
No, the only reason I'm saying that is because it's so early in his second
Okay.
term. I don't feel
Okay.
like it's fair to evaluate his record on
Yeah,
deregulation
fair
in
enough.
second term
So,
yet.
yeah,
That was the only point I was making, was that
fair enough. Good.
I
So,
wait until afterwards and then say, okay, now we can say that what his record on deregulation is.
yes, sure.
Absolutely. And I think also that if people make a big deal about the first 100 days, which I think is like a Hallmark holiday that was just made up to suit selling cards, but
Agreed.
we're 7% into a 1,492-day second term. So I have to give a majority of deference to first term successes to see where he's going to pick this up going toward the next November of 2028. So
Yeah, cool.
I'm a long game guy.
I want to get
So,
this totally off the table. Is there anyone that has joined us today that believes that Republican presidents, slash including President Trump, are better than Democratic presidents in reducing regulations at the federal level? I think it's universally agreed that Republicans generally want to reduce regulations, and Democrats are generally much more willing to solve problems by putting in regulations. Agreed or disagree? Anyone want
Agree.
to argue? Okay, seeing none, that is totally off the table. There's 5 more, Professor, or wherever else you want to go.
well, maybe I guess we can keep going down. All right, let's talk about energy dominance, I suppose. What do you see President Trump doing that is leading to American energy dominance?
Well, I think if I consider his body of work, I think that when it was interrupted by Biden canceling the leases of a lot of drilling programs, I'd have to say that that was the biggest blow to President Trump's first term in stepping toward long-term energy dominance for the United States. So I'm still going to say it, in the first 100 days, it was near the end of those 100 days that the president said, now I've got to undo everything that President Biden did that was stopping my vision of long-term energy dominance. So he's opening up drilling again. He is opening up drilling in. He'll go to Anwar. He's going to go to the Gulf of America. He's going to do things that reignite everything that he began with, that Biden smothered in the cradle as soon as
Okay.
he became president.
In order to make this more productive as we go down the list, I will also concede that when he's using an executive order to undo a Biden executive order, what I'm interested in is what about beyond that? Beyond simply undoing a Biden executive order, what do you like?
I think that if he were to maintain, and I do believe this, I'll go out on a ledge on a prediction for the midterms. I think that President George W. Bush was the first Republican in a long while to make gains in the House and the Senate in 2004. And I think that Trump, despite everything that you hear about the presidency already being a failure, I think that President Trump is going to pick up seats in the House and the Senate in the midterms. So to answer your question with that as a detail, I think that his intent is to go beyond the EOs and put a lot of this security for energy dominance into legislation that he'll sign. So it may not be the perfect package that he'll come up with moderates in the House and the Senate, but I think it'll be enough for him to sign legislation that the legislative branch will put forth to secure energy dominance in the next 50 years.
Can I get a definition of energy dominance from you?
I'd say coal with minimal regulation, drilling with minimal regulation. I think a cutback on investments, quote unquote, investments in technologies that we know are not efficient for a 340, 350 million uh, uh, population in our country. I like solar. I like some green energy programs, but I love them in limited areas. You just can't say we're going to cut off all coal, all oil, all everything that's cheap and mostly clean at this point in sacrificing for things that are a little bit pie in the sky for me. So I think it's going to be centered around coal and oil and precious minerals that will begin relationships with other countries in the future, like Ukraine, like Africa, like Sudan.
We've got two experts with us that are energy experts, Scott Yenser and Drew Bowen. I'm hesitant to ask with them listening. NJ, are you in favor of federal law superseding state regulations in the energy policy? Or do you like the federal system?
You know what? I'd have to say, and I think the attorneys here would agree with me, I like it in principle, but there's a legal framework that is very careful and it's architected in a very fragile way that would help the federal government succeed in its long-term goals if it can work it legally with the states. I know you'll have some cooperative governors for 25 of the states at least. It's getting the blue states on board with probably a legal framework that's going to be an incentivized set of benefits to those blue states. But it's going to be a big political battle. But in general, I believe in the supremacy. I believe in federal government supremacy. So if you make it a national security issue, you might have more success with the blue states. But what we've seen in the first 100 days, I see district courts involved, federal courts, I see appeals, I see so many things going to the Supreme Court. It'll be a mess. I won't lie. I think it's going to be a big legal mess, especially when it comes to coal and oil.
Cool. Professor.
Yeah, I guess my next question is, what do you think the role of the president is? What do you think what's your definition of a good president?
Oh gosh. My personal definition of a good president is um, I know that you have to campaign in poetry and govern in prose, but I like a president that will take action. If he campaigns on a number of issues, I will like a president that begins acting on those issues regardless of the noise that's going to surround him on a daily basis. Um, I even sometimes I don't refer to sometimes my own conservative colleagues. I don't refer to Republicans, but I often refer back to the great liberal voices of the modern day that say, you know what? You may not like the guy, but you got to respect that he is moving on everything that he promised in the campaign. And that goes from the Obama bros, David Plouffe, Jim Messina, Bill Maher, Jim Carville. All those guys are saying, like it or not, this guy is moving like crazy. And even the Obama bros said, we wished that we could have done a lot better job of following up on, and this is Doge, for instance. President Obama would have done a better job of following up on his cutting fraud, waste, and abuse, because we see Trump doing this and we admire that the guy's just getting things done. So to begin first and foremost, just like the core values of everybody that's on this call, I think we all like somebody that just follows through with what they say they are going to do. And that's what makes a good president to me, even though that's never going to make him popular. It might make him popular in my house, but that's not everybody.
Yeah, Professor, historical context for that question.
I just was wondering because I would start with the presidential oath of office, and I would start with the Constitution. I would say that taking action for its own sake is not necessarily good. I wouldn't call that a positive good in and of itself, because if one is taking action to do bad policies, I would say
Well,
that's a bad president. And
but if
I
you
also,
look at
I'm not sure I would value copying the Democrats either. Um, but
well, the history of that, Stephen, as you well know, and I'm not schooling you at all. I'm just a lay guy. I'm just a regular person here. Um, I think that when you look at the text of the oath of office, it's about preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution. And then I think those are the three key words in the oath of office. Now, because a president says protect, defend, and preserve the Constitution, that has very well led into some presidents saying, well, I don't think this law means that. For me to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution, that means taking another route off of that law that has been passed. And you'll have constitutional experts say, well, that's terrible that he's going this direction on this law. But you'll have another set of constitutional excerpts that'll say, wow, gutsy, we'll see where it goes. It'll probably be at the Supreme Court to get a decision at that point. But it's not about just strictly upholding. It's about preserving, protecting, and defending. And unfortunately, or fortunately, those are very subjective words, especially given the body of the Constitution itself, as well as the amendments that are up for daily debate all the time.
and so you would find following through. In other words, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Okay.
Um,
Go ahead. That's
so
cool.
yeah, no, I want to reframe what you're saying without well, without being dishonest. But um, it sounds like you're saying um, a lot of Democrats did this stuff in the past, so we're going to do it now.
Um, no, not exactly. Because if we go back to the original question of what makes a good president, and by your definition, and tell me if I'm mischaracterizing it, you're saying he's got to protect the Constitution. A good president, step one, protects the Constitution. I'm saying I like the idea of how that sounds, but a good president preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution is something that is up for daily debate by virtue of those three words being very subjective. So he'll do his best. And in fact, that's the other part. Before the words protect, preserve, and defend come, the key words right before that oath of office say, I will do my best to preserve, protect, and defend. So when you start listen, I mean, anybody on this call is going to say to their spouse, their significant other, I'll do my best to get to the garage and the lawn this week. Okay. And everyone's like, okay, let's see what your best is. And that becomes the debate when the Constitution is involved. So
did it bother you when he made his statement that he would set aside the Constitution?
I'd have to see the exact quote. It depends on, I'm a big guy with context. You give me the subject, you give me the words
Yeah. No,
before
well,
that.
a researcher can find it, but
Sure.
it was a
But
Truth Social where he said, we will have to set aside the Constitution.
I'd have to see the context of those remarks.
We'll set it aside while Jake finds it for you.
Sure. That sounds great, but I'd be happy to address it.
Okay. And then with
I just
regards
want to be informed,
yeah. Look, with regards to lower taxes, do you think that tariffs are taxes?
I don't think they're taxes technically by definition of the word. I do know that there is an expense that is incurred along the way with tariffs. I'm not going to call it a tax. I'll just call it a side effect that I'm not particularly fond of. But with respect to tariffs, I do believe in the long game of what he's trying to achieve with them. And he did say, there's going to be some short-term pain before we get what we want. And he was never shy about saying that.
What do you think the long game is? I'm sorry.
I think the long game is increased revenue through tariffs to give long-term tax relief to American citizens that are going to benefit from the revenue that comes to this country from the tariffs.
So hold on. I just want to be clear about this. You think the purpose of the tariffs is to increase revenue?
Sorry, I'm talking about the effect, not the reason why you have them.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, I misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sorry about
the
that. And
purpose of tariffs. So Trump's purpose on tariffs is not to increase revenue.
I think that's one of his long-term games. I think that he's using tariffs right now. I think his use of tariffs right now is as a negotiating tool more than anything else. I think
So
we got with the UK deal that came yesterday with the number of
Well, NJ,
leaders.
that disproves your point yesterday. He's kept the 10% in with UK. That's not a negotiating tactic. It's
Well, but it's not the end of the negotiation. I think that in my business, I can tell you this. I mean, when we make deals on the Hill, when we make deals abroad globally with conflict resolution and the other service products that we've got, sometimes you begin with something that is more of a milestone than it is an end. And with a negotiation, I can tell you this, it evolves 24/7, even if that includes the person that you're in the deal with calling you a month or two later saying, hey, I know what we said 2 months ago, but I have an idea. Let me throw in a sweetener so we can take that 10% and turn it into 5%. And in addition to this, let's do this instead where we'll both win. You know, in my business, it's a win if everybody walks away equally unhappy. So I think that the 10% is the beginning of a long game. I don't think it's like, okay, we can close the book on the UK now. It doesn't work that way. I've never seen a
but the
negotiation
president is
that way.
supposed to be both head of state and also the head of the government. Do you
Right.
find that there's a problem if tariffs are a negotiating tool with the president not saying what he's doing? Or we're just supposed to guess that at the purpose of what tariffs are? Or do you think there's any downside to being, I guess, I don't know if he's being deliberately dishonest or introducing chaos into the marketplace?
I think that we are what we are by our DNA, and we're always going to be that way. Our jobs may change, but our DNA does not change. And so, again, to jump to the president, his DNA is a business person, and he even gave an interview in December. I swear it was at Forbes magazine, and if I got that wrong, I apologize. But he woke up, and in this interview, he said, "Every day I wake up, and the first words that I utter to myself are, this is business, this is business, this is business." That is a president, is that's his job now. He has always been a deal maker. He has always been a negotiator. He's been a real estate guy and a business guy. And now he's a billionaire. He's the president of the United States. You can't throw in a word, and I don't want to call you out too much for this, because when you say he's the head of state, which I'm suddenly supposed to go, oh, then he's supposed to act in a particular way that makes everybody comfortable and he's very polite. I don't believe that
I don't
he,
necessarily think that you need to make everybody comfortable and be polite. I'm just asking, do you think that the president has some responsibility in terms of representing the United States, both to the American people and to other countries?
in the 1800s, Lord Palmerston gave the quote that nations don't have friends, they only have interests. So given that fact of human nature and relations between nations, I don't think that he has an obligation to show his hand to everybody that he sits down with. And in fact, I think that's his greatest tool, is to hold his cards close to the vest and sometimes create the chaos that you mentioned a few minutes ago, because we've never seen a president like this before in our lives. I know I haven't. I'd like to be a fairly good student of presidential history, and I've never heard of anybody quite like a Trump, even in the 1800s. So I think that we're seeing something that none of us has seen in our lives, and I think it's been a roller coaster ride for everybody.
But
And
I want,
I'm willing
but
to, I'm
Lord,
willing
sorry,
to
I want to go
write.
back to that Lord Palmerston quote now, though. Do you believe that there are no countries on earth that share similar values with the United States?
On the surface, yes. And when it serves their interests, yes. I think that we've seen too many instances, though, where a country has not just helped on purpose because there's no end game for them. I'm thinking of Darfur, genocide, places in the world where there are genocide, but any other place where we think that there's something to be interested in, like resources, we say, oh, well, it's all about the people. We've got to help the people. Look in the conflicts of the Persian Gulf. We can't let Qatar get run over by Iran or Iraq because these poor people are suffering. Well, the fact is, we were interested in the oil, and the oil is precious, and that's what is at the bottom of every one of these barrels. So
But
you go to a place where there's no resources and no country's investing a dollar to save another human being.
so
So
this is fascinating to me now because do you think that the United States of America is based on ideals?
on paper, I believe that they're based on great ideals. I think the forefathers created a framework, and I
What
call
about in
it,
reality?
yes, in
Can you take
reality,
away, can you
absolutely.
take away the word on paper? Uh,
Well, and I was referring to the Constitution where they were putting an owner's manual together that set up the basis for action, ideals, freedom. Mostly, I do believe that freedom is at the heart of all of at the owner's manual that the forefathers put together for us.
what
Um,
about the Declaration? How do you feel about that?
Declaration of Independence is the same thing. We could also take a really deep dive into the Declaration of Independence too, and we could look at the resources that the forefathers, the business people in this country, just didn't want to send back to England anymore. And so I think that there was religious persecution, sure, but I think that they came here and found a prize. And if we'd have come to the United States back a long time ago and found uh, South Sudan, I think that all the forefathers would have gone back to England and figured out another way to be wealthy. But
So, but
that
you do
wasn't the case.
believe in the Declaration and the Constitution,
I
and,
absolutely
and
do.
you believe that the president should follow the oath of office.
I I absolutely do. I do believe that he should follow the oath of office, which we've already determined is very subjective because he says, I'll try my best to
Well,
preserve,
hold
protect, and
on,
defend the
NJ.
Constitution.
Uh, a little bit of new ground.
Okay.
We do agree that the president has the authority to question constitutional abilities until a court says stop, right? Even a district court, until an appellate court overrules the district court, and until the Supreme Court decides, right? I mean,
Correct. And that's what that exercise is designed to do. When the president decided to issue a bunch of VOs, I think that we'd mentioned the other day that um, the president had every intention of flooding the zone with executive orders, knowing that 60% of them were going to wind up in court and they were all going to wind up being resolved at the Supreme Court. So I think that it's shots on goal when it comes to uh, this term, this president, because he's going to do what he thinks is right, but he also knows that it's going to wind through the courts ultimately to find validation or rejection. And
let's
I
hope
think
this ages well. Are you 100% confident that the president, when told by the U.S. Supreme Court to do something, will do it?
Yes, and I have a feeling that you are angling toward the 9-0 decision that Supreme Court made about uh, Abrego in El
To your point,
Salvador.
though, to your point, I'm more concerned about the multitude of flooding the zones that the president may believe in the unitary executive and actually not care what the U.S. Supreme Court does and says, I'm concerned about that. Do you have any of that same concern?
You know, you and I have had conversations casually in the past. I am not for the unitary executive. I'm a big believer that the Supreme Court has a way to step in to balance out the interests of the other two branches of government. And I think that between the legislative branch and the executive branch, I think that you've got, I think they're stacked a little bit against the judiciary because if the legislative branch's job is to make, the president's job is to execute.
Mhm.
The other day, we were talking about the tariffs. How can one man, uh, you know, just decide that he's going to engage in tariff wars with every other country on the planet, for instance? How does one man do that? And the other day, the Senate fell short of taking back the power of the president to set those tariffs. But it was the courts going all the way back to 1825. And I think it was Justice Marshall at the time. And our researcher can find the answer to that real quick. But I swear it goes back to 1825 with Chief Justice Marshall, that was the first Chief Justice to open the door for Congress to give the power more and more and more to the president to make unilateral decisions on implementing tariffs. And I think there have been 6 key cases since then, all the way up to, I think it was the Fair Trade Act in 1974, and even one more court case after that, where you can say, yes, the president can do this. It seems unusual, but the courts said, yes, Congress, you can do this if you want to, but the power of the tariff was always designed to be something that Congress was supposed to do, not the president. So I'm worried about the Congress sometimes ganging up or getting in a gang with the president, and the court is the one branch that has to rein in the 2 other branches to go, hey, you can go this far, but not much further.
Professor.
Who won the election in 2020?
President
Oh,
Biden.
gosh. Careful, NJ. You were doing great. You could be the new press secretary for President Trump until the answer to this question. Be careful.
Well, it's a very straightforward question. Who won the election in 2020? President Biden. President Joseph Biden was
You're out. Sorry.
certified as the president of the United States in 2020.
You were doing so good, man. You were awesome. Seriously, you were a great ambassador for the president, and you just blew it. You're out.
I'd like to be a great ambassador for our model of government and the unpleasantries that just come with that. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you still get up every day.
Wow. President Tootle, Professor Tootle, are you comfortable with that
Yeah,
answer?
I like that. President
Very clear. I mean, that was very clear. President Biden.
No, well, that's gonna, can you guess what my follow-up is gonna be, though?
No.
What do you
Ask.
believe? What do you believe President Trump did on January 6th, 2020?
Yeah. One of my 12.
What the president did, and all you have to do is look at the record of the timestamps on the tweets that he sent out that day, the efforts that he took in the couple of days leading up to Inauguration Day about asking the Sergeant at Arms for National Guard support, asking Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, for National Guard support. I think the president, no, I don't think the president, I know the president did everything in his power to prepare for something that we all knew might be a little tense that day. And so he asked for help. That's what he did. What the media turned that into, I think, is fiction. But that's not the question, is what the media did. The question is, what did President Trump do? And those are the 3 major things that he did that any honest intellectual person is going to look in the mirror and say, he did do that. Look at the timestamps, look at the phone calls, look at the things that he said. It's on record.
Do you think that he engaged in activities with John Eastman or with Vice President Pence in order to try to get the electors to choose him to be the next president?
I think even for me, and I'm a detailed guy, and I will go through so many things with a fine-tooth comb just so I can find what I think the answer is going to be. I've heard so many versions of that, Stephen, and I won't lie. I've heard so many versions. I gave up on the fine-tooth comb aspect of trying to find out exactly what was said, because I still don't know to this day the answer to that question. But I have tried, and then I was like, you got to move on because this has been settled, and we can all grouse about it.
NJ, the comments, although belated, way too late, Vice President Pence has been very clear what the president asked him to do. That's not under controversy, and President Trump has never denied that he asked the vice president to do that. In fact, he's still angry with the vice president. I mean, the facts are not confusing on that issue. The president ordered the vice president not to certify the election, correct?
Well, I think that I think that you believe what Pence has said. I think you
And the president, I believe what they both said.
I've seen, here's the clinician side of me, unfortunately, John, and everybody else here. I have seen politicians turn on a dime for everything that they had said steadily for the course of a year to suit their own interests. It doesn't mean
Not
that they're bad
attacking
people.
Rubio. He's the Secretary of State.
I don't think that.
Sorry for the jab. I don't mean to be. Forgive me.
No, that's okay. I mean, this is what we're doing here. We're tossing it around today, and that's okay. I think that a person has an interest in making themselves clear. I don't care if it's Director Comey. I don't care if it's Mike Pence. I don't care if it's Cassidy Hutchinson in the J6 hearings. You know, when enough light and pressure is applied to quotes that cannot ever be erased, if somebody puts enough effort into it, you'll find out that it's common in DC that those things will unravel very slowly. But by the time they're completely unraveled, does it have any relevance? No. Will it have any bearing on anything else? Very rarely. So I think Pence was serving his own interests. I think Pence wanted to look good. And that's why I think Pence had to take the position he did, because he tried to throw his hat in the ring in 2024 very briefly. So I think he was just covering his backside. And I like Mike Pence. I've met him and I think he's a decent human being. But I think he's also a politician with motives. All politicians have motives. I don't attach myself to politicians. I attach myself to policies. And you and I have talked about this. So
put anybody. You really would be a good press secretary. I'm putting I want to be a helpful recommendation for you, but you're pretty good at this. Professor Tootle.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just trying to figure out what his position is. So you believe that Biden won the election, but you don't believe what Mike Pence said happened, and you maybe don't believe what Donald Trump said happened.
I'm not saying that I disbelieve Mike Pence, and I'm not saying that I believe Mike Pence. What I am saying is the waters are so muddied with what people say, and the big phrase has always been in politics, he said or she said something to the effect of. And as soon as you say that,
is there anybody who makes I just have never heard anybody who was in the room make any other argument other than President Trump tried to get Pence to not certify the election. I just haven't. Whose account are you relying upon that didn't happen?
Well, when I say that I don't believe Mike Pence or I do believe Mike Pence, I'm saying right here, I'm not sure. I've heard so many versions. I cannot tell
NJ,
you what I believe.
NJ,
I know politicians. That's what I know.
But on this point, President Trump and Vice President Pence agree. We know what happened. They both said what they did. I mean, it's not under debate. Well, we know what they've said.
Well, so the question has to again be context, because President Trump has a version of what he thinks happened. Mike Pence has a version. Those in the room have a version. I don't know. I mean, you're just asking just a regular old me today, just a guy. When you ask me the question, do I believe Mike Pence? I'm in the middle. I know what was partially said.
How about this part? Do you believe Donald Trump, though? Do you believe Donald Trump?
I believe Donald Trump is also a politician. So I think that everyone is going to take a position where they look the least culpable. And so I know that doesn't say anything other than my philosophical take on it, but these are politicians at the end of the day, 24/7. So you're going to get a slightly different version of every event that occurs. And if you're going to watch Fox News, it's because Fox News tells you and makes you feel better about what you're already predisposed to believe. If you watch MSNBC, You like MSNBC because it's going to meet a predisposition that you
Well,
already have.
NJ,
So
NJ,
with respect
NJ,
to
there
these conversations, I don't know.
NJ, there may be a lot of people. I know a lot of people. You know a lot of people. And I like people that don't
Sure.
pay any attention to politics. They're raising their family. They're making a living. They're
There
traveling.
you
They're
go.
hobbies. I like them. So yes, there may be a lot of people that want to be verified with whatever their predisposition is. There's
Sure.
a ton of people that don't. You, professor, me, I bet everybody on this conversation today. We actually want to know the truth. We want to know what happened. We want to
I
know.
always want to know the truth.
Well, I guess
I do,
if
John.
how
I always
about
want to know the truth,
how
but I
about I
don't
put it
always
this
get
way?
what I want.
If you knew that Donald Trump tried to overthrow the government of the United States, would you still vote for him?
That is a question on a premise that if valid, he would have been found guilty under 14.3, the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which he was not. And that's why it never went to the Senate, because I think that he was just,
so
even the
unless
Democrats, even the
I didn't
liberals.
I didn't ask if he was convicted. I just want to know
No,
if
you
you
said
believe
if
that
he
he tried
had
to
been found.
overthrow the government of the United States, would you still vote for him?
Well, your first question was if it were found that President Trump tried to overthrow the government, if that were a fact, I'd have to say that he had been convicted under Amendment 14, Section 3.
Okay, so let me modify my question. If you believe that President Trump tried to overthrow the government of the United States, would you still vote for him?
I didn't ever believe that he tried to overthrow the government of the United States just by virtue of what happened on January 6th, the fact that he reached out to the Nancy Pelosi, the fact that he tweeted what he did about everybody go home, and the way that he reached out to the Sergeant of Arms for security. I don't think those are the
But
actions.
if you believed that he tried to get Mike Pence to not count the votes of American voters who had voted for electors, would you still vote for him?
I'm not going to say that I believe that. I don't believe the
I'm
premise.
not asking. Fine, you don't believe it. I'll take that as your concession. But if you believed that Donald Trump,
I'm already saying I don't believe it, so I can't say that if I believed it, I could give you an answer.
so if Donald Trump tried to get Mike Pence to not accept the electors and to cast their votes for him, right? If you believe that he did that, would you still vote for him?
I think that the law would have taken a course that would ever have prevented me for voting for him. So I think the premise is false because to follow
you
your
understand
logic,
that laws, not every sin that is also against the law is prosecuted by every district attorney.
true.
Right? Every sparrow that falls from the sky is not, the result of a prosecutor in your county.
Sure,
So
of course.
crimes go, and things that are wrong are not necessarily crimes if somebody's doing it for the first time.
That may be the case, but when we're talking about the way that the country is divided right now, the way that the political parties are funded by billionaires, I don't think that anyone's going to take the chance to invest billions of dollars into a campaign and endorsements if they're not going to find out the answer to your question. So yes, not all crimes go prosecuted. And I think we're talking about en masse, all kinds of things happen every day. Not all of them are prosecuted. But at this level of pro sports, so to speak, there would be an answer that billions and billions of dollars would find the answer to definitively, especially people that have an interest in the outcome of whether or not Trump is president or Harris is president. So I just don't think this is something that would just slip through the cracks. If it were legitimate, it would have been prosecuted with political interests.
But you don't believe that when Donald Trump says that the election of 2020 was rigged and because of COVID, Democrats had changed election laws and so many illegal people voted that the election was fraudulent in enough states that he should have been president. I mean, that's his argument.
That's hyperbole, and that is that is a big chunk. That's a food group, a major food group of a politician's approach to messaging. Hyperbole doesn't always have to be true. It just has to be emotional, and it has to do exactly what it is we're doing here today. We're talking about it 5 years later, right now. That's how
But you don't
powerful
believe
that
it. But you don't
hyperbole
believe
is.
that's true.
No, I believe President Biden was certified as the president. I think that no election, you can go back all the way to the presidential election of 1960 with the narrow margin that Kennedy won over Nixon and all the things that we hear anecdotally went on in Chicago at the time, that if they wouldn't have happened, delivered by Mayor Daley, Nixon would have won the presidency. But that's all just talk between people philosophizing over political corruption, mail-in ballot harvesting, you name it. That's just
So,
that's all guesswork. I mean, so
Professor,
what the president said in 2020, fine, he can say it, it's hyperbole, but boy, did he get people fired up. And I think that's his true motive as a politician, getting people fired up and talking about it 5 years later, like we are.
wow.
But
Okay, Professor.
if Joe, if Joe Biden had directed Kamala Harris to ignore the electors who voted for Donald Trump, would you have had a problem with that?
You know, if I actually knew that it had happened, and I'm a conservative guy, I'm a Republican, okay, but I have to hold the same standard for both parties as I do for my daily work, no matter what that entails in my daily work. I need to know what really happened. I just don't want to guess. I'm not going to make a major decision based on guesswork. So even flipping it to Biden and Harris, I'm just going to say the same thing about Trump and Pence. I don't know what happened in that room if
Yes,
it
you
would have happened.
do. MJ, you do too. We all know what happened. We have both the versions.
You
Both
know,
versions agree. We know what happened.
I was watching, John, that reminds me of oh my goodness. It was an
I
interview
just want to know, is
that
there any evidence for what you're saying that it
well,
didn't? Uh,
well, the thing is, if we're talking about evidence, I mean, you cannot prove the negative. That is a basis in law.
yeah, right.
If
But we
you
have two
say that
positive.
if you've got to have
What we
evidence,
have to do is we have to take the accounts of every single person who was in the room.
well,
And
that's
every single person who's in the room, that's all the evidence we have. We
and
don't.
there. Well,
We agree.
it's a burden of proof, and it's still hearsay. It's everyone's version. And if I can tell you something really quickly, this is important, and I'll tell you why this is crazy important. Because one of the things that we've done in the past for a number of issues, including presidential elections, we've conducted focus groups, okay, especially after debates and such. And you have got 12 people, you might have 15 people in a room, all sitting in their chairs by their lonesome, watching one screen that's right in front of them. They will watch an exchange between two opponents, and there's no doubt on what was said by whom and when. But then the focus group is over, and they say, "What did you see?" You will get 15 different answers, half of them favoring one guy, half of them favoring the other person. And you're going, how did you come to that? We all saw it on the
Yeah, the
screen,
human brain
but
is
there's a
asking.
complete division in interpretation. So
But
that's what I think about all the people in the room. I think that if there was 10 people in that room, I guarantee there's going to be 10 different versions of what
except
they
in this
think.
instance, there was two people in the room and they both agree. So your analogy is not good. Okay.
Well, I mean, but I'm saying is it's subjective. You hear what you want to hear. You want to be reinforced with things that make you feel better about your own core beliefs. And if that involves cognitive dissonance, or if that involves maybe padding the truth on one side to make it sound like you're justifying your own position, we just don't know about that psychology. And believe me, if you go to Washington, D.C., that is a petri dish of pathologies.
But
And
if
a lot of
let
them
me
are right between the ears. So we can't really say.
Okay,
I
so let's just
maintain
say
we
in
don't
our
know.
hypothetical that you know that Donald Trump tried to not get the election certified. You would find that disqualifying for a public office.
I guess if it were, it would be legally disqualifying before I even ever had a chance to vote for the candidate, because he would be out. The law would have stepped in and said, dude, you're done. It's moving.
But
Okay.
But
We're not.
I'm just saying, like, I don't know that that's true, because the only remedy would be impeachment and removal from office, and
That's
But
because
even
he's
impeachment
president of
is a
the United
political
States.
exercise, that's why and there's a perfect example right there. You've got one side of the aisle saying Trump is a terrible president. He's a twice impeached president. But on the other side of the aisle, they're saying, hey, he's a twice acquitted president. What does that tell you about the House? So which side are you going to say is the worst ammo against the president? That he was twice impeached or twice acquitted for impeachment?
Yeah, you really should be the press secretary. You'd be ideal. So Professor Tootle, we've gone. This has never happened before. We've gone an hour and 5 minutes without even me opening it up to questions from people. But I want to give you one last. I still have 9 items on my list that we haven't even gotten to. And let me just tell, for the record, I just want people to know, law and order. And we didn't get to the end of that. Not only the January 6th, but pardons, but also the payment of American taxpayer dollars to the poor person who tried to climb through the window that got killed. Yikes. We did talk about tariffs, deficit and debt, Ukraine, NATO, Taiwan, immigration, we touched on, law firms, media, DEI, and the uncertainty of the presidential office. Anyway, those were my topics. Let's just leave those off to the side. Professor Tootle, you have one bite at the apple to say what's real. You asked for this. You said I'd like people to challenge me. I want to be challenged. Well, I think NJ is doing that for you. What is your one last question for NJ, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A.
I guess what I'm interested in, and what I wanted to know was, what are you for? And even after an hour, I don't think I know that.
Well, I'm still for right now what I was for in the very beginning as a conservative, as somebody who wants to see my government do certain things and stay out of certain things. And my belief is very strong that I think that the Bill of Rights, as a beginning, the Bill of Rights was a document that was authored out of a distrust for government. And it gave all the power to the people and took power away from the government. And that, for me, is the basis of public policy. And that includes lower regulations, lower taxes, me staying out of everybody's way and everyone staying out of my way if I just want to be left alone. I like that freedom to participate and to not participate. So I like cheap gas. I like cheap oil. I like cheap coal. I like cheap goods. I like things that are going to make my life easier. I want my government to have the invisible capitalist hand. I don't want it to be intrusive into my every thought. I didn't like, in particular, one of the Biden agents from HHS coming to my door saying, we have here through your Colorado Department of Health that you haven't been vaccinated, nor have your children. I didn't like that one bit, and I'm not vaccinated today, and neither are my children, but that's my decision. I like the fact that I can say that to them and they went away politely, but I want my government to do things that make my life easier, not harder. And that includes just letting me keep more of my money, letting me send my kids to good schools without a giant bureaucracy, keeping taxes low and keeping energy cheap. That's what I want. That's what I believe.
Except for, I guess you just said something that was contradictory on its face, but maybe you can explain it.
Sure. Thanks.
You want the government to
I'm
leave
having
you
fun,
alone?
by the way, you guys. Thanks for having me. I've never done one of these before, so this is cool.
You want the government to leave you alone, or do you want the government to make your life easier, not harder?
Well, one is going to be a de facto. I mean, if they leave me alone and set up the right infrastructure for freedom by virtue of their policies, which would be modern day policies to make my life easier, they are going to just get out of my way by virtue of loosening up their grip on what it is that I can do, what I enjoy, how much money I can keep every year.
And if this is a power that you don't necessarily like when it's executed by Democrats, why would you like it when it's executed by Republicans?
And which power are you talking about being exercised?
Well, I mean, you use the example of HHS, but I'm trying to figure out where the limits are for you with regards to positive governance. Like, if, for instance, if President Biden says that we're going to use this obscure law for Gulf War veterans and emergency COVID powers to not first forgive student loans and then not collect on the debt that you owe for 5 years, and you say that's wrong. That is a president not enforcing the law.
Well, if we're going to obscure laws, I do have I have a belief on obscure laws. I think that they can be useful. I like the reasoning of an obscure law like the Enemy Aliens Act. But if the court says in modern times, what makes it obscure is the fact that it might be antiquated. If a modern Supreme Court says, all right, it's pretty old, but it works, let him do it. But a court may also say conversely, it's pretty old and it doesn't apply for all the case law that exists since that original decision. In those cases, I might not like it, but I'm going to be like, all right, well, yeah, no hard feelings. I mean, it's been settled by the court, and at that point,
So
I just have to
I just
follow.
wanted to, so you were fine with President Biden not enforcing border laws?
No, I wasn't, because that's a basic thing. It's not obscure to secure the border. It's not an obscure law to secure the border. It's not an obscure law to restrict immigration so small towns don't suffer by virtue of influxes of people being flown into those small towns to overwhelm services there. I think that you can have legal immigration. I'm for that completely. I'm not for open borders. That's a completely different characterization.
But in terms of just not following a law because you don't like it, would you say that that would be a bad thing to allow presidents to have the discretion to simply not follow a law because they don't like it?
I'm gonna defend President Biden here. This might be unusual to hear. When the Supreme Court told President Biden that he couldn't forgive all those loans, President Biden did say, I'm not going to pay attention to the Supreme Court, which was the soundbite for conservatives to pounce on him. But the fact was, he said that because of a number of reasons that we're talking about today. But what he did after that is he went back and looked through existing infrastructure, existing regulations, laws, and everything to figure out how to get the result that the Supreme Court denied him on to begin with. So if President Biden said, I'm not going to follow the Supreme Court, he meant it in spirit, because I'll find another way where I can navigate this relief for students. So
when he extended the COVID emergency for the duration of his entire presidency, you don't have a problem with Biden saying that he was not going to collect student loans because of the COVID emergency?
Well, I think that if he had the legal basis to enact something that I might have not agreed with, I don't have to like it, Stephen. That's the thing. But if he had the legal backing to extend that emergency and affect a lot of outcomes, I'd be like, oh, that sucks. But hey, man, the rules are what the rules are.
I'm starting to feel like I understand your sort of philosophy of governance, which is you can do anything you want if you have the power to do it and nobody stops you.
I think that nobody, if the court can't stop you, if the Supreme Court says that thing that you don't like isn't valid, then your summary sort of works. But the court has stepped in and has said, this doesn't work. So
but I'm just saying you wouldn't have a problem with a politician who just simply said, I'm going to do whatever I want until someone stops me.
Well, I think you've got bank robbers saying that very same thing. And I guess it's true up until the point where they get caught and thrown in the calaboose.
So, but, you didn't find President Biden or President Obama to be lawless because they weren't caught.
I wouldn't say that lawless would be. I think you got the White House counsel's office, and I know those guys. The president doesn't say the president just doesn't say he's not going to follow a law until he gets everyone in the White House counsel's office to say, you know what, you can go this far with this, by the way. But there's going to be a reckoning if you do. The
God,
lawyers,
going back to
But you're
January
pretty sure
6th.
that, I guess I'm curious. Are you pretty sure that that's how the president Trump's White House operates currently?
he's said it on several occasions. I've heard him say it on several occasions. He might field a question and say, well, I'm doing this, and I've got very bright lawyers in the White House counsel's office saying this is what I can do. He's not a lawyer, and he's said as much. But if you have a White House counsel's office that'll say, yes, you can do this, they'll also say, and you'll get about this far, but go ahead and see how far you can get, because it'll probably not last forever. And that goes with every White House counsel's office that I've ever worked with. The first time I ever did contract work was with the office of Bill Clinton when he was president. So same personalities run all these things, and they'll push it to the very edge before they're told that they can't do it. That's
So,
just the way
gentlemen,
politics goes.
Gentlemen, I got to interrupt. There is a famous podcaster that goes 12 hours straight, like 6 or 7 days a week, and he's gone for like 10 years straight. I'm making those numbers up, but it is crazy. That's all he does is he sits on the line and goes for 12 hours straight, and he has a huge following. So clearly we should be going on for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours on this conversation, because we'd get more readership or watchership. Professor, forgive me. We have our culture that we want to open up just to whoever is willing to take time out of their morning to join us. And we only have 15 minutes left. So I've just got to interrupt us and see if anybody, Drew, I know you're signing off. Do you want to ask a question?
And Stephen, thank you for that. Thank you, Stephen.
You bet.
That was
Scott,
awesome.
I bet you want to ask a question. Or Nancy, you're the three first bites of the apple. Take yourself off mute and ask a question. Come on, don't be shy.
Thank you for joining, NJ. It's nice to meet you, and I think you've
Nice
done
to meet you, Scott. Thank
really,
you.
really great job articulating your position here. It's refreshing.
Thank you.
Just a compliment, Scott?
That's it.
Oh gosh, you politically correct guy. Anyway, good luck in the oil and gas industry, Scott. Thanks for being politically neutral. Thanks. Okay, Nancy. You must love this show, Nancy.
I am having a great time, and it's nice meeting you, NJ. Hopefully you and I can talk again sometime. I think
I'd
that
love
there
to,
should
Nancy.
be,
Thanks.
yeah. I think there should be a continuation of this, because we didn't hit a lot of subjects, actually. And with it being kind of the off season, I love to educate people on these matters. I mean, I went to UNC with an education degree. Yay, John and I went to UNC together. So
I taught there for 2 years.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
we were in the same era, John and I were.
Very cool.
But I think we needed to touch on this. I think we need to educate people more on it. You did a great job, NJ. I fully support everything that you said.
Thank you, Nancy.
There's a lot more that needs to be said as well. I mean, we didn't even touch the borders.
Ukraine.
Yeah, lots of things we didn't touch yet, but I'd be willing to step in and do another one.
I'd be happy to come back. I just need caffeine, and that's my gas tank right there. So anytime.
Appreciate you joining in. Okay, we do have a couple liberals in the group. I want to give them a bite at the apple. Who do I want to call as a liberal? Oh, I don't want to do that. All right, let's just open it up. Anybody have a critique or concern? Don Van Gilder's been sending me a message. He's madder than hell. But come on, Don, you don't have courage to ask online? No, not yet. Oh, yeah, he does. Come on, Don, tell us the truth, but remember, no cursing and no being disrespectful. Don, Naval Academy grad or Jesuit priest? What do you say, Don?
I'm not angry at Sal. I don't understand. I just view this man completely differently than what obviously a chunk of my old party looks at him. And when I lose my mind when I hear him talking about running for a third term. And what's even worse, 50% of current Republicans were in favor of that. I don't know how you justify that.
Well, you know what I think, Don, that nice to meet you, Don, by the way. The president is very good at throwing bones, And the left and even some of the middle are very good at fetching them no matter what that bone is made out of.
Okay, hold on.
So and he's just said, even just last week, he said, of course not, I'm not going to run for a third term.
No. My problem is 50% of polled Republicans were fine with him running for a third term. If Obama announced he was going to run for a third term, they would lose their freaking minds.
But they'd get 50% of Democrats going, yeah, man, let's mix this up a little bit. I mean, that's the thing. That's the part about when you have a fan base. The word fan is short for fanatic. And if Obama did that, I guarantee you'd get 51+% Democrats saying, hey, give him a chance and see what the courts say about it. So we're talking about fans. We're not talking about long-term players here. And I think everyone on this board is a long-term player. You can't account for the fan base. I'm sure there's people out there wearing Donald Trump wigs and painting their bodies orange and going to football games. That's not me. And I don't think that's most of the electorate. But 50% polled is a different question. What were the sample groups like? Did they call everyone that was just drunk that day? Maybe. 50% of drunk Republicans are for a third term. Okay, I believe that. But that's probably in the crosstabs. You got to look at the details of the line items.
And I also completely disagree with you. I think Donald Trump's intent on January 6th was to get the election overthrown. I have no doubts about that whatsoever. And
Well,
I am massively impressed with your mental gymnastics and able to back him that day. I see a person, for the only time the Congress has been invaded other than January 6th was 1812. And no one will ever be able to change my mind.
But Don, 48.6% of the American voters saw all that you and I saw with, and you and I agree, and disagree with you and I. So it's not just NJ, it's the American people.
A large number of the voters will see that and ignore it. They want to own the libs. And that's their number one thing. And they see Donald Trump as being the number one person for owning the libs. And
I'm sorry, Don, I didn't hear that last thing. Donald Trump as being the number one person. Do you say
owning the libs? I see
owning the libs.
I see a large chunk of the current. I don't even call it the Republican Party anymore. I call it the Trumplican Party. And that's what I see now. And he has more and more made it the Trumplican Party. We started off with saying that you have to be 100% for Donald Trump, or you're not. You're out. I mean, look at all the great people he picked in his first cabinet. They were the most awesome people until they went against him even a little bit. Then they became the worst person ever. I'll never understand that.
Well, Don, that's politics. And if you, like me, get a chance to rub elbows 9 to 5 with all the players that are, contracting officers at the bottom of every federal department, or secretaries of federal departments and all the deputy assistant secretaries, there's a common thread, especially in DC. They always say, if you want a friend in DC, get a dog, because you have a minute-to-minute opportunity to completely change your mind and completely reconstruct the narrative about any individual. That's what makes DC a place that I hope I don't die there. I was born here in Colorado. My family got here in the 1850s. I want to die here. I don't want to die in DC because I think it's about as soulless a place as Las Vegas.
Well, I grew up outside DC, but I obviously have not spent the kind of time there that you have. I grew up in Maryland.
Sure.
Look, and I get into very interesting debates with my fellow Naval Academy classmates. It's like it's amazing just that how people that could go to the same school and have the camaraderie that we have and have the similar experiences that we did. All of us served our country for at least 5 years after graduation. I've got 10 or more classmates who are still in the military and all or 3-star admirals or generals or above.
Wrap it up, Don.
Yeah, anyway, it's just amazing to me how people can look at this person who is the polar opposite of everything I was trained to be a leader.
Sure.
Everything.
You're proving that you're an American. There's like 100% of Americans that are shocked at the other 50% of Americans. So yeah, cool.
I'm just shocked that I guess I'll never understand how some people can look at him in this way and like, yeah, he's not bad, and the other people look at him and like he scares the hell out of me.
And Don, just super quickly, I follow you. I mean, it goes right back to the polling groups, the focus groups. How could 12 people just have such totally different interpretations of what they saw? But I think ultimately, whether you're Adlerian or if you're Freudian, I think everyone in their adult life, especially with politics and relationships, love relationships, everyone is trying to cure some childhood thing, always. And whether you know it every day, you say yes or no in your mind 1,000 times before you actually utter those 2 words. So I think you find 12 different answers, 20 different answers, because everyone's trying to reconcile some unanswered question that they still just don't know the answer to. I know that sounds gobbledygook, but it's all psychology.
I totally disagree. But thanks for that ad on psychology, since none of us are psychiatrists or psychologists. Sorry, NJ. Okay.
I don't even play one in DC, so.
Right. So Jeff and Bart, both of you get the last bite at the apple before Professor Tootle finishes us off. Bart, you're off.
All right.
So
you want me to start off since I'm unmuted? NJ, it's nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you, Bart.
It's interesting. I understand a lot of what you're saying. I'm not a supporter of the president, but I understand kind of where you're coming from, and I'd be curious to get your reaction to kind of a fear that I have. If you were kind of saying earlier that this is a kind of, you have to look at Donald Trump kind of in a continuum, from 2016 through now, and this is sort of a continuation of the first term. What I'm afraid of is that, Donald Trump seems to be a master kind of ringleader of a circus, and he's running his circus right now. What I worry about is when he has a real crisis, that's when you see everything break down. I think historians like, Stephen and his successors are going to write about the COVID epidemic, because that was a complete, utter failure from the White House. There was a lot of responsibility, but Donald Trump completely failed in what he was doing. Yes, he started the creation of the COVID vaccine, which ended up getting us out of the mess, but he didn't have a whole lot to do with that. So how do you react to that? I mean, we have not had a major crisis yet. Now, I did get a thing flash across my computer screen a minute ago. Apparently, passenger airline radar is now out in the New York area, particularly again at Newark International Airport. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, this is, getting ridiculous. But how do you react to that? How do you make someone like me feel like the world's not going to come to an end in the next 3 years and some months?
Gosh, what's tough about this, and so I'll have to jump back in and pretend to be a psychologist for a second. Because in your question, you used 2 words twice. One was fear, one was worry. And it's difficult for me sometimes, without knowing you a little bit better or knowing the overall situation that's narrowed down to some specific event. It's hard to tell you that it's going to be okay. I know that there are things already in place that transcend what a president does. When a crisis occurs of any major significance, You always check with the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. You call your National Security Council. You call the governors of every state. And once you do that, things take shape in a response. And the first step in a good response or crisis management is first letting everybody know what you know and calling everybody whose job it is to help bad situations get better. So it's not like Trump's going to be on his couch just winging it. And if I was going to address your fear and your worry, all I could do is say that it's like anything we do every day. We can all approach and have individual crises, but we always rely upon what we can count on by way of experience and people around us to get it through, to get us through it. And I think that the president is no different, and that's why he has an apparatus up to and including how one cabinet member sits outside of the State of the Union. So if something terrible happens, there's continuity of government. So there's a lot of safeguards that you can count on, even if you don't trust the president or like the president or think he knows what he's doing. Circus is not too far off, but I would say that in this industry in general, politics is a circus, Bart, and I wish that I could say better things about it. But the other day I was talking to John and I said, John, I think my biggest problem that I have with people that don't do this for a living is they are looking for virtue in a place in politics where it has never existed, not even since the days of Plato and Aristotle. They always wrote about things that dealt with personal interests at the end or deception and war, and Machiavelli, the prince. So try first to not believe that politics is a virtuous industry. It's not. But
And by the way,
you count on the safeguards.
That's a delightful conversation. Another point where we totally disagree. Politics must be about virtue, or what's the point? So let's get back. And I think
Of
you
course.
missed. It's
And
never
so, Bart,
happened.
and thanks for letting me answer that, Bart.
Yeah, it must happen, NJ, and anything that gets in the way of that should be eliminated. Bart, thanks for your question. Hey, Jeff, I know you're driving, but this is your. Yep, you took yourself. Go quickly. Nope, I can't hear you. Anyone else hear him? Are you driving, Jeff? I can't hear you. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
He's not driving. I can see a tree in the back window.
Oh, good. He's parked, huh? All right, Jeff. Sorry. We'll have to get you another time. All right. Patrick, you get a bite at the apple. No cursing, Jeff. We can read lips. Sorry. Patrick, anything? All right, we're 1 minute over already. And Jeff, you were a noble trying to get yourself off mute, but it's not working. Okay. Gotcha. All right, Professor Tootle. This didn't go how I thought it was going to go at all. I feel bad that you didn't give your depth and breadth of history and relationship of Trump versus other presidents. So that's my fault as a facilitator for not sussing that out of you. Can you give some concluding remarks or thoughts with NJ? And NJ, you'll get a quick bite of the apple. You get 2 bites of the apple, Professor. Give some response. NJ, you get a quick one, and then we'll finish off with you again, Professor.
Perfect.
I was a Republican and a conservative because of what I was for. And I spent most of my life explaining that the proper role of government is to do what a community of people cannot do or do so well for themselves. And then they're separate but individual capacities, and in all other things, government ought not to interfere. And that what the Republican Party stood for was individual liberty, economic opportunity, and American exceptionalism. And I was for all of those things. But I also believe that there is such a thing as right and wrong, and that you should elect people who are going to engage in statesmanship, meaning that people are going to, that presidents should be leaders, and that they should encourage people to take the next step towards truth. And there's a difference between simply advocating for power for its own sake and using power in order to get people to take the next step towards realizing the dreams of the founders. And I was a conservative because, and I am a conservative because I believe that what we should be advancing is the never-ending quest for liberty that was set out by the founders. And so the idea that when somebody rejects all of those things, that we can't simply say, here's somebody who rejects all of these things, and say, well, I understand that he sometimes does things that I like. It's simply far too cynical of a position for me to take to say that all politicians are like that. As a historian, I know that's simply not true. It is not true that all politicians have been like this. It is true that politicians have been like this, since the 1990s, but and it is true that we've had many politicians like this throughout American history. But it is not true that they've all been like this. And it's also not true that all politicians are bad. I've known a lot of, I shouldn't say, I don't know all congressmen, but I know many politicians who are actually good people, who are trying to do the right thing for the right reason. And I think that what I've always tried to advocate is that we should encourage people to get into politics who are good people, who are doing the right things for the right reasons. And I am not cynical enough that I will simply support someone who I think is actively a bad person who's doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons. So I guess, and if I were to form that as part of a question, one of the topics we had a few weeks ago was, where's your line? At what point has a line been crossed where you simply say, I cannot support this person anymore? So my question, and maybe this should be for another show, or if you want to think about it, but my question for both NJ and for Nancy is, what would Donald Trump have to do in order for you to not support him anymore?
Is that rhetorical?
Well, you can either answer it now if it's short, or or we have to put it off for another show if you want to answer it later.
John, you tell me what to do. I guess I want to respond.
You're on mute, but I think we should have a follow-up. Is that possible?
Sure.
Perhaps.
Cover.
NJ, just give some response to that overall, because you might
No
imagine
problem.
that that's manna from heaven for me. That to me is my whole 40 years. What Professor Tootle has just said, that's all I want to do is
of course,
advocate virtue and philosophy and the right relationship between the individual and the state. And sure, I need to make a living. And I know
Sure.
other people need to make a living, but the bottom line is that is really important to me. And you've done a good job advocating practicalities of an inside beltway lobbyist. So good job. Bridge that gap in 1 minute or less.
Well, I think if I had the 1 minute, and I hate to be practical again, but it's going to go to more of the state of the battlefield than what I would like in this world. And I often say I live in the world as it is, not as I wish it were, because that's where the prosperity for the group that I have to lead has to manage. They have to trust me to do that. And so when I think about the current battlefield, I have to depart, but agree with Stephen on one thing to start with. He is for certain things. He's for certain things. He's for certain things, all really terrific. But as a modern participant, a modern player in modern politics, not only do you have to be for things, but you also have to actively be against things, because there just isn't any wave of being for something without resistance. And physics alone tells us that that's how that works. If you go to the subject of, there's got to be right and wrong, again, you can say that putting kids, when Obama had a policy of putting kids in cages when he was president, every Republican said that was wrong. Every liberal said that was right. When Trump put kids in cages, which he did, every liberal said that was wrong, and every conservative said that was right. So right and wrong are just too simplistic when it comes to public policy, and even more too simplistic when it comes to politics, because that goalpost or that line that you speak of is always moving, and the industry itself dedicates hours and billions of dollars to move the goalpost and to move the line to the goal line. That is just a reality. So I like where you're coming from. I told John the other day, I said, in my next life, I'm going to be a poet. I'm going to be an artist, and I'm not going to get into any of this stuff ever again. But that's my higher self. I just wish I could live with my higher self, but there is a world that we have to manage, and you just can't say that's wrong. And everyone's going to go, wow, Stephen, you're right. Stop. Doesn't work that way. You've got to work on a daily basis, 24 hours a day for something and against something.
Yeah, fascinating. Again, as I told you this week when we had coffee, I disagree. Professor Tootle, this is your last bite at the apple. We've gone way too long. This is one of
Okay.
our longest shows.
And thank you.
Summarize where we were and what we should have done and what we didn't do.
Well, I guess what his answer underscores is something that I've long believed, which is that the Republican Party now is a mirror image of the Democratic Party. They are emulating exactly what the Democrats have done since the New Deal. The idea that what we're supposed to do is to protect the interests of groups that we like is a rejection of the founding of the Republican Party. The Republican Party was founded on the basis of liberty to all, right? That's what Abraham Lincoln said is the only thing that will give hope to all. It is the only thing that will make people work. It's the only thing that will make people strive. It's the only thing that will ever entwine itself about the human heart is the principle of liberty to all. And when you are advocating for a group of people because you see yourself as being primarily an advocate, you are rejecting the principle of liberty to all. And so what I've seen is that nobody is advocating for conservatism in terms of preserving the ideals of the founding, and we essentially have no Republican Party. We have nobody out there advocating for the traditional beliefs of the Republican Party if all we care about is advancing the interests of a group of people who we favor. We're essentially mirroring the New Deal coalition as put forward by Franklin Roosevelt. And I didn't become a Republican and I'm not a conservative in order to copy the 1930s progressives. It's simply not anything I can even. It doesn't even register on my radar as a goal. It's something that Democrats did, and not something that I'm interested in doing.
Okay, Professor, I think that summarizes your philosophy, and I think you got a fair bite at the apple, NJ. So, friends, we have a small Facebook group called Tootle Talks, and that's just to show you when the shows are. I may have forgotten to post on it. I had a couple people say, "What's the link?" I may have forgotten to post it this week. You can see all these shows on Spotify and YouTube under Tootle Talk or Tootle Talks. Just Google it, you'll find it. I would encourage you to write a blog on this. NJ, you will. I know you will because you write a lot of stuff.
In all my spare time, absolutely.
Yeah, and she'll be mad at this or clarify something. Please do. But I encourage everybody to write something about this. Why? Because it's good for our business. We have gotten. I don't know. I don't think we've gotten over $1 yet, but we might get over $1 if you all blog on this and send this to our link. We do this for civic goodwill, not for money or power or fame. We just do this because we think it's important to have people understand our society. So NJ, thanks for having people resonate with you.
Thanks. And John, if I could say one thing super
Please.
quick. It was great to be here today. It was one of the very few times where I was in a forum where people were listening to each other and not just waiting for their turn to talk. So
I think
it
that
was
is
great.
true.
My brain is activities off the scale. So thank you for that.
I think that's true. I don't think we communicated and listened, but I don't think we like wrestled with it and then went off on a slightly new path. So
Sure.
that bothered me. But yes, you're right, Professor.
We have more opportunities.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Professor Tootle, last bite, or are we good?
I think we're good. I just want to say thank you to everybody who came. It's not easy to show up to something like this where you know that people are going to disagree with you, but you know, at least in this forum, the stakes have never been lower, except for maybe if you're, you know, going to lose your job over this or something. But
Right. And thanks for the people that could lose their job for not losing their
yeah,
job.
that's what I mean. Those are the real heroes, the people who showed up because they care so much about America that you know, you might be putting your job at risk by showing up.
Agreed. And that includes you, NJ. I would have been a little more loyal to the president if I were you.
I'm going to write myself up with a disciplinary action by the end of the day. So don't worry.
All right. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you so very much. Have a great weekend, y'all.
Thanks very much,
Thank you.
John.
This was
Appreciate
good.
it.
Thanks
Bye,
again. I
everyone.
really mean that. Thank you.
Bye.